Okay, so let's continue our discussion of Rime and the Ancient Mariner and part two of the poem. So in part one, we saw that the mariner, for sort of no explicable reason, killed the bird, the albatross. So following this action that he took, we see the consequences of his murder of the bird. So he starts becoming punished, and all the sailors on the ship are going to be punished for this crime. So part two will be the first indication that there's going to be serious repercussions for his action of taking that bird's life. The first one, so he acknowledges that there's no bird. The sweet bird did not follow, no longer, came to say hello to them every day. And he refers to this as a hellish thing that he's done. So killing the bird was a hellish thing, and it's something that he's going to be punished for. So it was an evil act that was unjustified, uncalled for, and there's going to be some punishments as a result. And there's also this sort of powerful aspect of the bird in its symbolic significance of the natural world. So when the bird is gone, it seems all of nature is going to punish the mariner. So the first thing that happens is that the breeze stops. So there's no breeze for a ship, which means it's stuck there, right? It's in kind of almost like a limbo in the middle of the sea. There's no way it's moving forward. It's sort of just lost at sea. And there's no breeze blowing it, so it's in a stuck condition. And it's as if the bird had brought the breeze that helped them on their way. And now that the bird has died, there's no breeze in the air, and they're stuck there. So the bird had brought this fog and mist and breeze. So there's connection between the bird and the natural world that was helping them along in their journey. So the breeze drops down, the sails drop down, and all the sailors are sad as sad can be. And they were upset with this mariner who had killed the bird. The hot sun comes out. So not only are they stuck in the middle of the ocean, but it's very, very hot. And soon they start suffering the side effects of dehydration and thirst. So water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. Very famous lines there. So they're surrounded by water. This is one of the ironies of a sea voyage. You're surrounded by water, but it's undrinkable. It's seawater, so you can't drink it. And then all around them, the natural world is a reflection of their state of punishment. So the very deep, the very ocean begins to kind of rot around them. And all these slimy things come out of the sea. So the sea itself is this kind of a reflection of this terrible circumstance. And all these slimy creatures start coming out of the sea. I guess sea snakes or some weird creatures. So it's almost this kind of magical reaction of nature against the mariner for having killed the bird. And then the water, like witches' oils, burnt green and blue and white. So the water almost starts sort of bubbling or changing colors. And it sounds as if it was, almost possessed by spirits. And every sailor aboard this ship was utterly dehydrated. And every tongue, through utter drought, was withered at the root. We could not speak no more than if we had been choked with soot. So they're all, parched, dehydrated. And then the men, the sailors, do something. So the first punishment, or the second punishment after the natural world, is to hang the cross, the albatross, about the neck of the mariner. So instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. is the last line of part two. So they hang the actual bird around the neck of the mariner, and this is his burden that he has to carry because he did the horrible thing of killing the bird. So it's a sign of his sin, of the evil deed that he committed, and now it's a burden that he has to carry. So this is his burden to bear, and he's going to be punished until he redeems himself. So there's going to be this theme of sin and redemption, a religious kind of connotation there, that's going to be played out in this story of a sea voyage. So he's sinned by killing the albatross. How is he going to redeem himself for that terrible deed he did? So that's what we're going to sort of see in the upcoming sections of the poem. So the third part of the poem, the punishments keep getting worse and worse. So they've already struggled with dehydration and being lost at sea. The mariner has to wear this albatross around his neck, and then things get progressively worse. So part three, they're still suffering. So each throat was parched and glazed, each eye a weary time, how glazed each weary eye. So all the men, the sailors, are suffering physically. In the distance they see a little speck, and then it grows larger and larger, and it seems almost as if this is going to be a salvation. This is a ship in the distance coming straight towards them. And they're so dehydrated that they can't even yell, but he sucks his own blood and cries, "A sail, a sail." So there's the ship in the distance, and it's getting closer and closer, so they think, oh, here's our salvation, they're going to come save us, and it's a miracle. So they're all, at this moment, happy. But it's not what it appears. The ship is a ghost ship, basically, and on board there are two spirits. So as the ship moves closer, the mariner sees who's aboard this ship, and there's this woman and the figure of death. So we see that it is, he says, "And is that woman all her crew? Is that a death? And are there two? Is death that woman's mate?" So on board this ship we have a woman, and then you have a kind of personification of death. So, you can imagine a shroud and, what death would look like. And then the woman is described. So her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold. Her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare life in death was she, who thicks man's blood with cold. So she is not a normal woman. She represents, or she personifies, the nightmare life in death. So what is life in death? It's a kind of ambiguous position. It's almost like a limbo. You're in between living and the dead. I guess a zombie would count as kind of a life and death. You're not at rest. You haven't passed on into the heaven. So you're just kind of stuck there, not quite alive, not quite dead. So that's what this woman represents. A lot of good not alliteration, but a lot of good descriptions there, metaphors. So she's as white as leprosy. So she kind of represents this life, almost like a zombie, the non-living, but those who are kind of stuck or trapped in between the living and the dead. And it turns out that this woman, life and death, is playing a game of dice with death. So they're really competing in this game to win the souls of those sailors and the mariner aboard this ship. So it all comes down to this roll of a dice game, and it turns out that she wins. So the game is done. I've won, quoth she, and whistles thrice. So she wins this game of dice, and she wins the souls of all aboard this ship. So almost immediately after she's won this game of fate, all the men die, basically, or they're given over to life and death. So one after one, by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang and cursed me in the eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan, with heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. So each man aboard this ship drops down in a lifeless lump, and they're gone, basically. So their souls did from their bodies fly. They fled to bliss or woe. So the men's souls leave their body and they go to either heaven or hell. And every soul, it passed me by like the whiz of my crossbow. So he's reminded again of his actions, and these are the results. So each sailor curses him, drops down dead, and then their spirits go off into the afterlife. The mariner, is not killed, though. He's cursed to this life in death. So the woman has won this game, and he's now cursed with this kind of stuck in a limbo between life and death. So this is the sort of next level of his punishment, is that his whole crew dies, and he bears that burden as well around his neck. So he's responsible for every man that dies aboard this ship, in addition to having killed the bird. So this is another consequence. So part 4 is where we get the beginning of the mariner's redemption. So he has sinned, he's suffering for it, and we see him gradually growing wiser and redeeming himself in the eyes of the natural world or the spiritual world, that he has to prove that he's worthy of life again. So he's all alone now on the ship, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea. And never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. So he is in agony, facing a lot of guilt and the burden. All of his crew is now dead. The many men so beautiful, and they all dead, did lie, and 1,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. So the slimy things that he's referring to are all these little sea creatures that are shown or at the surface of the water that he can see. So their lives are still going, and he equates himself with one of them now. So he doesn't see himself as above nature anymore. He's one of these slimy things, one of 1,000 slimy things around him. So they're kind of on the equal plane. He no longer sees himself as superior or dominant to nature. So the slimy creatures are one of the many elements of nature that the mariner has to contend with, and this is part of his punishment, is to experience all that the forces of nature that he's exposed to. So you've already seen his ship go through ice, being surrounded by ice, and then the bird helped them through that. Now they were facing the hot sun, and how they were baked and forced into physical suffering through the heat and dehydration. And we also see that, yeah, all these tiny, or these thousand slimy little creatures come out of the water. And then all of these elements are the presence of nature in the voyage of this mariner and his men. But we see him coming to terms with his decision or his actions of killing the bird. So he's going to redeem himself, and part three is the first starting point of his redemption. So he's there all alone now, stuck in this limbo where he can't die, but he can't fully live. So it's kind of weighing down on his mind. And he's also, there's dead bodies all around him, right? So all of his crew, their corpses are still there, and each one is cursing him with their eyes, staring at him. So he says, an orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high, but oh, more horrible than that is the curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die. So death would be a release from this horrible situation that he's in, but he can't die because that woman won his soul in a game of dice. And then, so we have a kind of turn in his fortunes when he blesses the creatures. So beyond the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire, blue, glossy green, and velvet black. They coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. O happy living things, no tongue their beauty might declare. A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure, my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware. The selfsame moment I could pray, and from my neck so free the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. So his burden of wearing the albatross, the bird around his neck, is released in that moment that he blesses these sea snakes in the water. So instead of killing them or, thinking they're gross, he says they're so beautiful, and he watches them and appreciates them and looks at how beautiful they are, and he doesn't even have words to express their beauty. And a spring of love gushes from his heart, so he feels love for these creatures, and blesses them. So he blesses their lives. So instead of killing them, he blesses them and loves them. So this is the first sense of a turn in his character's growth. So we see him going from being a murderer of nature to blessing and loving nature in the form of these water snakes. So this is really one of the first elements of his redemption. So he's released from his sin when the albatross falls off from his neck and drops like lead into the sea. So part of his guilt is being released here.